All right, our next guest is Dr. Steve Rasner. Dr. Steve Rasner has earned his DMD at the University of Pennsylvania. He has pursued 4,500 plus hours of continuing education, over 1,000 of which were oral surgical sciences. He earned his mastership in the Academy of General Dentistry in 1997, completed both MISH Implant Institute curriculum and PICO's Institute continuum, and earned his diplomat status with the ICOI in 2018. Dr. Rasner has taught for 24 years in 45 American states and 5 countries. He offers intimate live patient surgical courses in New Jersey. He also teaches both practice management and hands-on surgical courses for national and state dental associations. He has been recognized in Dentistry's Day's top clinical educators list for the past 13 years. He's authored 3 books and over 50 industry and journal publications, and is the host of the Lion-Hearted Dentist podcast. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Closing the Deal Dental podcast. I'm your host, Elijah Desmond, CEO and co-founder of Dental Fit Brokerage, and we have with us today the one, the only, the famous, the man, Dr. Steve Rasner. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing great. Anytime I do something with you, it's great. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And, for those of you who don't know, Steve and I have been good friends now, going on, it's got to be 2.5, feels like 2.5, 3 years, and I feel like I've known him a lifetime. You ever meet somebody and you became like fast friends? It's like immediately that kind of like potentially if you meet your wife, but a bromance, but when you meet somebody, you're like, man, he's the man, like immediate, strong bond. And I can't say enough good things about Steve and our journey so far. Big shout out to Paul Goodman for accidentally putting us together at his nachos event. I wouldn't have met Steve if not for that. But I have always heard Steve being mentioned at the same time of all of the greats of dentistry. And when I got a chance to hear him speak and get to know him, I understood the reason why. Is you're one of the most down to earth humans. That is one of the most successful dentists that I've ever met. And I can't say enough good things about you, my friend. Thanks for joining for sure.
Hey, I thank you very much. And what he just said is absolutely. We were sitting next to each other, ready to go on stage to a crowd that was in an audience. We were on the side, and that's how we met. And I felt exactly the same way. I mean, it's nice when you get older in life. You're not coveting friends every 2 weeks. It just happens or it doesn't happen, and it truly happened with us. And you're an amazing guy, and I'm pleased to be a part of this. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, in this season, we're talking about specifically dentists who have made an exit and sold, whether they sold to a private practice dentist or a DSO. And, you're one of the first people that popped up in my mind. And we always start off every show the same way. And I can't wait to hear what your song is. But if you were to do this over again, if Dental Fit Brokerage existed when you sold your practice, can you tell me, you walk into a room full of buyers, this is your moment to sell your life's work, and you just have to have a specific song that you walk into.
Oh, I know.
What's that song?
Well, I love music, and you know what kind of music I love. And I'm sure the audience, I would think that 9 out of 10 of you don't know what I'm talking about, but you need to Google it and listen to it. It's called Keep On by D-Train, 1982. Okay. Keep On by D-Train. And it's about what we all talk about all the time, about not giving up on your dreams and your hopes, and keep on. It's a really, in fact, like, that when I speak, you're the only person I ever heard of that had a walk-up song. I used to have a walk-up song too, and I've used that before. It's old rhythm and blues, soul, it's back in the day with the Whispers and the Gap Band and people like that. And it is a really cool, it makes you want to get out of your seat, and it's got a great rhythm. And I know this podcast isn't about music, but I could talk about music for quite some time.
Yeah, well, I mean, you absolutely, I love music as well. Obviously, I DJ, And it's crazy. We just came from a pitch event at Florida Dental Convention.
Oh, you did?
Yep, we did, and there was 5 people that said, that they picked their walk-on song, and there was one individual that said, "I actually don't want a walk-on song," and I'm sitting here thinking, like, how do you not like music? And anyways, it was an extremely successful event. But Steve, tell our listeners who are our primary dentists that are looking to sell their practice, tell us a little bit about your background for the people who don't know you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to do this in a minute because I've thought about this story because I never expected to become public in dentistry and be a speaker and all that stuff. And I thought, well, how did I get there? How did that happen? And how it happened was this. When I went to dental school, and I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and it was 1976 to 1980, I just got blown out the door by my colleagues. They were really, really much smarter in the sciences than I was. And that's because I was a psych major in undergraduate school, and I just took the minimum sciences because I didn't even know what I really wanted to do. In case I wanted to be a dentist, which my father was, I better take those as my electives. The year of biology, 2 years of chemistry, physics, all the stuff I hated, by the way. But when I got to dental school, that obviously was the major science of most of the guys. So you get bombarded, as everybody knows, with like 10 science courses in your first year there. And these guys just blew through them. They were talented anyway. And I struggled. And by the time I came up for air by my 3rd or 4th year and we were working in the clinic and I thrived, the difference in dental school of your ranking, whether you have an average of 90 or 84, it's not like they had a 90 and I had a 70, is 100 spots. So I was in the back of my class and I didn't get any GPR positions. I couldn't further my career, which I wanted to do. So I ended up back in my hometown, and it felt, Elijah, like I had stayed back in school. Can you imagine? I had graduated in an Ivy League dental school, a very, very talented class, and I was back where I started because I didn't want to be in my town. When you're 20 some years old, who wants to go back to their hometown unless it's Chicago, Atlanta, LA, or wherever because I knew my town was struggling. My father was a very good dentist, but he was mom and pop, and look, a lot of guys were mom and pop in 1970 and 1980. And so I really, it was out of my DNA to feel like that. It wasn't my DNA to accept, okay, well, I couldn't get a GPR, so I'm just going to stay here. So I immediately started training myself through CE. And before I knew it, I had this thriving practice. The CE stuff was paying off, and I had a different vision of myself, and I'd hire different people because I knew I was ascending as a clinician. I wasn't a bad clinician anyway. It just didn't reflect in the grades. And so my practice blew up in a good way. It doubled every year. I'll never forget it. Literally doubled the first 5 years. And I had I don't know if this was a big deal. Everybody thought it was a big deal. I had $1 million practice in 4 years, back in 1980 something. And people wanted to know, I don't know how they found out, wanted to know how I did all that. And fast forward, 30, 40 years, I had a very successful 2 locations, and my colleagues found out about my success. And by the way, in an area of the United States that was ranked as the 2nd worst place to live, not by me, by USA Today. So the cliff notes of my story is that I didn't do well in dental school, had to go back to my hometown, which I didn't really want to do. It was rural, southern New Jersey, no new influx of anything. It was depressing. And I wanted to change that. And my vision probably was to get out of the area and practice somewhere else. But I thought I owed it to my father to give it a try. And you know, I did very, very well. And I proved, I really do believe, I know everybody says, build it and it will come, right? From Field of Dreams. And I think that's true most of the time. I think you could be in an area that you selected for whatever reason, if you're a young dentist, that may not be the right area, because there's a lot of disadvantages to practicing in a rural, downtrodden area of the United States, including getting good staff members. That's a big thing. But whatever it is, I overcame a lot of obstacles and had an amazingly thriving practice that I did sell in 2022.
Got it. And thriving. Are you still at the $1 million practice when you sold? Are you still there? Or are you at a bigger practice? How many operatories?
Yeah. So eventually what happened is the practice that I was in the town that I went back to, that had 7 operatories. I know somebody out there can relate to this right now. I used every quarter inch, not every inch, every quarter inch of that practice. Okay. I mean, I had used everything. I added on, but there was no more space to add on. And eventually I acquired a second location. That was 15 years ago. I didn't acquire, I started new 15 years ago. And that did very, very well. So at the time that I actually exited, I had 2 different practices. Both had 7 operatories. One was much more modern than the other, but they both exist right now. They do very well.
Awesome. And, it's okay to not disclose this if you don't want to, but you started at $1 million practice 4 years out. 4 years out, you started at $1 million practice 4 years out. Did you maintain the $1 million practice, or did you grow prior to selling, or were you selling at that market?
Great question. No, I was doing 4 million 30 years ago. And then when I got the new practice that I started from scratch, I really did that just because of the environment. Like, I was 50 years old. I knew I still was going to be in this a while, and I didn't want to practice in the place that I had expanded a quarter of an inch. There was not even that to do anymore. I didn't even care if my revenues went up. Not a good thought, by the way, but that's just me. So now when it ended up in 5.56 million revenue is what it did.
Awesome. And, it's actually news to me. I always thought it was one location that you sold. You had 2 locations. Tell us a little bit about that. So oftentimes during a sale, when a doctor has 2 locations, a lot of doctors are like, well, I want to get rid of this one, but I want to keep this one. And most groups will not allow that. They want you to sell both of them. But you're one doctor. Did you sell both of them at the same time and then stay at one and not the other? Can you give us a little dynamic of how that went?
Well, at the time, listen, there's a lot of backstories to everybody's story. And mine was that, yes, they were 15 minutes apart, both in the same county. I wanted to sell both of them at the time. I had no desire to sell just one of them, because the first one, which always worried me, is in that original town. I'm telling you, I could not overstate how challenging and how incredible. Listen, anybody who knows me, I'm my own worst enemy. So when I sound like I'm boasting a little bit, it's a rare moment, so you should capture it. That practice in my original town, that you Google it yourself. I mean, I don't like saying it because I've had backlash before on the rare patient that'll see these things, and says I'm trashing my town. I'm just telling the truth. That town, that practice ended up doing about $4 million a year. And it is in a really difficult place to be successful in dentistry. Nobody's moving into that community for years. Okay. So, and the people that are there, it's not bad like there's drive-by shootings and things. It's just kind of a poor rural area. Fishermen, retired farmers, that kind of dollar stores everywhere. There's no Starbucks. There's no Saks Fifth Avenues. There's no nothing. There's not a movie theater. Nothing. You guys know, somebody out there listening has a town like this. Vineland, the second town I went to, is like New York compared to Bridgeton, but it really isn't New York. That doesn't have a movie theater either. It does have a Starbucks. So, okay, but it's only 15 minutes away. And I said, everybody has a backstory. I have an associate of 35 years in the Bridgeton practice at this point in my life. So they weren't worried that I wouldn't be going back and forth. They weren't worried about that. In fact, they liked that practice a little more. Not because of the money, because it was a plug-in. Because my associate there doesn't do a lot of procedures that a lot of dentists have learned to do. She doesn't do root canal. She doesn't do ortho. She doesn't do extractions. So that practice did that did like $1 million at this point out of the 5.5 or 6 million that we sold at.
And I'm going to go back to the sales. I know everybody's itching to hear, who did you sell to? But I want to take just a moment and pick something out of your story that you said. You said that your father was a dentist as well, but he had a mom and pop dental practice. And I didn't know, and maybe some of the listeners don't know, what do you mean by mom and pop practice? And I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah, I mean, a mom and pop practice, that the way he kept his records of who owed him this or that was like a notebook this big. There wasn't any computers. He had one staff member, a dental assistant and a front desk receptionist. We're talking about a 2-operatory. This is where I started. I started with him. I didn't start with an office, my own office. Downtown center, which is not much of a downtown. Had to take, I'm not kidding you, about 50 long steps to get to the second floor. It couldn't have been designed worse. Windows that weren't at this level, they were up high in the ceiling, so all you could see was the birds. Not cool windows, skylights. I don't mean that. Take a little window that you could see out that way. That's what I mean by mom and pop. I mean, we'll bill you, and then, young Steve Rasner comes onto the scene and starts working on patients, and that'll be, $227 today. Bill me. That's what your dad did. Right. And, he was a good dentist. He did a clean dentistry and all that type of stuff. He was beloved, hell, man, my chair had a pump that you pumped it up to raise it up.
So yeah, the second question, Steve, is, and look, I'm going through this. I still, yes, some dentists, it's just the beginning of it. I haven't dealt with it a lot. As you know, we're about 1.5 years out as a brokerage firm, but how do you navigate, or how did you, or how have your peers navigated when you have a practice and you have a kid and they show interest in being a dentist and they go to dental school? How are you handling your practice? Are you gifting it to them? Are you selling it to them? What have you seen work and not work when it comes to that? I know we're going off here a little bit, but I've not asked that question live on a podcast, and I'm curious, through your years in dentistry, what have you seen work, not work? And did you buy your practice or get gifted your practice from your father?
Well, first to that question, no. He sold it to me 50 years ago. He put me on a payment plan. It was peanuts, and it was very fair, and it was awkward as well, by the way. I don't have experience in that, but I know exactly what I would do. What I would do if I had a child that was my dentist in it. Listen, you have to, pardon me for this way of saying this, you have to do what you have to do in life. So here I am If any of you went back, or if you've heard me speak, I've spoken for 26 years. If you heard me speak in the last 10 years, up to 2021 or 2, you would have heard me talk anti-selling, anti-corporate dentistry, etc. You would have heard me say all those things because I believed it wasn't good for the profession or for dentistry. And to an extent, I still do believe that to an extent. I have changed and I have a different vision because I'm in it. And I have some real true things to say regarding that. But what I mean by that is, listen, we all know dentists in our communities or somewhere in the United States or wherever that have just killed it in life. I mean, for God's sakes, the dentist, the Los Angeles Lakers were just sold for $10 billion. That original owner was a dentist.
Wow.
User was a dentist. Now he's passed away, but his family is getting the 10 billion. So, but we all know dentists that made a fortune in this or that. But there's a lot of other dentists like me who didn't make a fortune in this or that, who didn't do well in real estate, who didn't kill it in the market. I did okay. And so the most valuable asset that I owned in my life was my practice and its value. Everybody knows me, says, I talk straight. When I say you have to do what you have to do, here I am this is 3 years ago, I'm 66 years old, and I was getting for years invitations or whatever it is, solicitations from various DSOs that were interested in my practice. And I don't really know why the one day I wrote back or clicked yes, I'm interested. I don't remember what was going on that day, but I did. And I met with that guy in Florida. I can't even remember who it was. And this is a true story. I've never told you this. And I met him at a restaurant like the day after the call in Florida. This is great because I haven't shared this. And I'll never forget. We met for breakfast. I brought my wife with me. He drives up in a Bentley sports car, which I friggin' loved. And he spent like 3 hours talking about, from his perspective, what I could realize, in other words, make a deal with the practice I had based on my EBITDA. A big word that some of you will get sick of when you go through this, but it's important.
Yeah, EBITDA.
EBITDA.
I got it right here on my shirt.
A big word that I wasn't familiar with. So at the end of the 3 hour, he kind of was a turnoff as the time went on. But it made me realize the potential of money I would be leaving on the table if I did it the tradition, because I'm kind of an old school dentist, not with my clinical dentistry, but the way that I think. And so I realized that he wasn't my answer, but whoa, I got to take a new look. Can I really leave literally millions of dollars on the table? Am I that set in life? And I clearly wasn't that set. He could do a podcast with me on overcoming obstacles that would blow your mind to how fortunate I felt to even be in this situation, because it wasn't like I always was thriving financially. I thrived in gross revenues. I did pretty well, but here, it's a different podcast. But, the best advice I could ever give a young dentist is live below your means in those first 10 years. Every successful dentist I ever met has the discipline to do that. I didn't. So I had the shore house. I had fancy cars and everything. I was always in debt, but never bothered me. That's the truth. And then it wasn't until later in my practice that I actually was flush and I didn't have debt. So when I had the chance with this gentleman who I met for breakfast and he laying out the possibilities, it made me start looking into it, is what happened. That's how I got in this space. And that's the truth. And so my real feeling about dentists that are thinking of selling, not that you asked me this, it really comes down to, can you afford, because if you go old school, if you have a successful practice, if you were grossing more, I don't know what the real number is. In my brain, 2 million or more, maybe it's less, I don't know. I was doing at the time, I told you, $5.5 million. And I had done that not just 1 year, I'd done it several years. The higher up you get, the harder it is to keep going straight up, so it levels up, but I was doing very well. And, if the old school is, what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to recruit a dentist to come down to Cumberland County, New Jersey, which I've described for you. Well, that's an epic challenge in itself to begin with. Why would a young 30-year-old want to come down and move his family and his 2 young children to an area that's certainly not blowing up in terms of potential? So I would have trouble even doing that on that level. Taking it a step further, where would a 30-year-old get the finances to pay me up front, which I would want? You don't want to be carrying debt for years and years and years. I mean, who would want to do that? And so that's a real life issue looking at this problem. Like, what do you do? Well, what I did is, even though I'd go on the record saying I don't think, DSOs are great for the profession, I sold. Now, I had done a lot of investigation. I had interviewed several different firms, DSOs, and what was he going to do? Take $1 million down and wait 10 years and worry about whether, he could run it the way I ran it? Hell no. You can't do that. And so, yeah, it was clearly worth it. And to be honest, I sold the Dental Care Alliance, and they were one of, I don't know, a handful. I didn't search. You don't have the time. These things take time. Multiple interviews, as you're going to find out. But here is what's different. What's different, in my opinion, than maybe 10 years ago of selling to a DSO. It's just like everything else in life. It has evolved. And the DSOs, in my opinion, can't afford to rip you off. They can't do that. And I know there's people out there that think that that's what happens and all that. There's certainly differences between the brokers and the available DSOs out there. So you have to interview more than one, for sure. But they're not evil. I mean, they want you got to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to get this asset, this instant influx in my checking account, which is pretty cool, by the way. Don't take me wrong when I say that. I'm not Mr. Businessman. I've never had an instance where all of a sudden you're doing a Zoom call. I'm talking about the day of the deal and all this money goes into your account. It's just never happened to me before. And it's exciting and it feels good. But there's a price for that. You can't just that's it. See you guys. I'm not working anymore. Thanks. You can't do that. And so, like anything in life, there comes a price. And the price for doing what I said is, they want you to keep your numbers up. Of course they do. Right. And, so you have to have the right mindset of what you're doing and why you are doing that. So, I got to be honest with you. There's and I don't know if this is true, Elijah, but it was true for me. There's a mindset of it's us against the DSO that bought me. Okay. They're the bad guys and because they're corporate, and we're all together here because we grew up together and built this thing that we just sold. Well, that's not true. They're not the enemy, and you shouldn't treat that way. And I'm not saying it because I'm on a podcast that says, I'm telling you the truth. It's, I had it back then, which I don't know if people can even get today. I had a 3-year exit, right? And I never dreamed that I would stay in.
How long has it been? How long has it been in that 3-year exit?
It's 3.5 years. It's 3.5 now.
Years, 6 months after the fact that you could leave if you want.
Yeah, I could leave. So why don't I leave? Well, to be honest with you, and I'm sure it's not unique to Dental Care Alliance, they've been decent. They're rarely in my practice, right? And one of the reasons is because I have a lot of pride, and I didn't realize how much I would have cared after the sale. I mean, I've been in this community 44 years. I care greatly about what it feels like to a patient that walks in my doors, whether DCA, Dental Care Alliance, whether they own 90% of it or I own 90% of it. And I'm going to tell you something. The biggest advantage for me was not the influx of money. Then all of a sudden I started taking vacations and living my life different. I buying new cars. I didn't do anything close to that. I mean, I lived pretty good even before that, but it was security. It was security. It was not having to deal. And I liked that. Like, I'm that guy. I am a micromanager. I enjoy getting involved for everything from advertising, which I still do, to how people represent me, to the staff that's working for me. I don't look at it a little bit like they own it. I look at like I still completely own it, which I don't.
So you sold your practice to DTA, and how is the change in your practice? How did your team, how did they feel when they found out you sold? After you sold, what actually changed in your practice? Did you have to use different materials? Did you have to increase your production? Like, what was the pressure or non-pressure that was put on you post-sale while working with DCA?
I'm going to be completely honest with you. In the first year, there was nothing. And I thought it was because it's Steve Rasner, they bought, and, I was the gem of this corner of the United States. The truth is I performed pretty well just because I always did. And why would I have changed that? And so they didn't mess with me because there's a lot of other practices that they had to address that weren't performing well. There are changes. If I had to give you some advice, which I don't think is unique to me, look, they let me use the same labs, the same materials, and things like that. It doesn't help the EBITDA, but they've never said you can't do that. Okay, I'm a fee-for-service practice they bought. That's really big. The thing that I haven't liked is they have set unrealistic growth goals for me. Now, that doesn't affect anything except the bonuses I'm supposed to get quarterly, which, and we're talking real today, it's really nice when you get an unexpected $30,000, $40,000 check, which hasn't happened this year, not one time. And I don't understand it because our numbers are pretty good. So I am told that they did not reach the projections that the company set for us, which are ridiculous to me. Like, I don't understand it, especially because it's so obvious to anybody that would have owned us. There'll be other DSOs watching this that will wish they had me on their team. I believe that because I'm working harder, not clinically so much. I work 3 days a week clinically. For example, I took on, I'm 70 years old. I took on all-on procedures that I'd never done, a year ago. And that's obviously very lucrative and productive. And I didn't have to do that. I knew how to do it surgically. I just had not incorporated that type. I'm very involved in our marketing programs to get new patients because it's a pride thing to me. All the things I've said before. But yes, they made us change our software, which I hate. I hate my software.
What's the software?
Denticon.
Denticon, yeah. Very familiar.
Horrible. I don't like the way they deal. So of course, they bought a company, or they own a company that does the billing. So think about it, guys, for a minute. I did inherit my father's practice, and I did inherit some of his ways. So imagine you have a practice for 44 years, and 95% of your patients pay you just when they're supposed to pay you. But there's always Mrs. Rogers that's come to you for 40 years. And, maybe she holds a balance once in a while. And, a lot of my patients are 80s and above now. I met them in their 40s. And they get not nice letters that I don't know about. Right? And I've lost patients, families of patients, because you do give up partly because you want to, the responsibilities of running the practice. I'm not involved. I don't know who owes me every dollar. I get a paycheck, and you can still earn, by the way, if you're a pretty good clinical dentist and you know a variety of procedures. The money doesn't stink now either. You make a percentage. That's what's going to happen. You're going to get X percentage per every 2 weeks. And look, I don't have to work. That's the interesting thing. And that's all individual, and I get it. I literally don't need to work based on assets at this point. But I like being in dentistry because it's, for me, what I did with my life. Okay? And so it's hard to give that up. I'm not a tournament golfer. I've never golfed. So, and I think if I did, I wouldn't want to give up dentistry just because of how my road went. That said, it's not bad making money either, and you kind of like have fun money. I like, but I care about the whole thing. I care still.
How did your team take it when they found that out that you were selling? How did the conversation go? What were they scared? Were they not happy with you? How did it go?
All of the above. All of the above. They were scared that everything was going to change. We had multiple entire staff meetings. I got to tell you, DCA in retrospect came down. They sent somebody down after I had about 3 meetings with my team and told them, this is what my observations are of this company that I'm going. Yeah, it was scary. Yeah. And they were scared and nobody quit. I do have to tell you, and I don't think it's related because they're out of dentistry, but I have had a lot of turnover since. I have. What's a lot? I don't know. At least 5 key players out of 18. Now, 2 or 3 of them got out of dentistry, and have been, when you practice 40 some years, you have a team. My team was with me for some of them 40 years. And so some of them just retired. Some of them got out, That is very, very difficult, whether you're CELTO DSO or not. Okay. Replacing people today, replacing staff members. So yes, they were frightened. And I will tell you the truth that the company, DCA, has done nothing negative to the employees that existed. Nothing. In fact, they honored, I guess, something unusual with my hygiene team shares their production. It's an unusual setup. So 2 hygienists on this given day, one does really well. The next day it's reversed. And so why do I do that? I've done it for years because they don't fight with the front desk over, oh, this one's getting quad scales all day and you gave me Mrs. Smith who has a denture and blah, blah, blah. And I guess you have to have the right personnel to make that happen. But that's what I have. And understandably, that's not easy for a DSO to assimilate that because it's very unusual. And I pleaded with them. And there's been other instances. It sounds like I'm doing a commercial for DSOs and DC, but I'm telling you the truth. And they honored that. And I was shocked about it. And I wanted to expand marketing I'm going on a different subject right now, from what I did for years, traditional hard copy marketing, because you can do that in rural areas, meaning magazines, newspapers, etc. And I wanted to go digital because I started to do all-ons. Well, it was a big leap in money. And we met and they did it. So they have held their end of the bargain as far as I'm concerned. And I don't know that my staff could say anything different. They really could not. So yes, they were fearful, and you're going to have to, after you vet your company and I'm sure that's all part of it. I would tell you that one mistake I made for sure was, so I didn't even think this way. So now you have a one leg up on me. Like if you think you're selling in a year or two and you think one particular staff member really deserves to be paid more and you're going to sell, you need to institute that raise now, not a month before you sell, because it's not going to happen. So I have a guy in my office right now. He's my top administrator. And then I have a sidekick who was always making $30,000 a year more than him, where he certainly deserves the same, and he's never gotten it. Because you can't realize that after you sell. It's not the way it works. You need to know that.
So thank you for those for that tip in regards to if you're going to give a raise, do it now, not wait. But if there was, while we wrap this thing up, if there was 2 suggestions that you had to a dentist who is 6 months out, a year out, prior to selling, and maybe if it's you telling your past self, right, or dentists that are listening, 2 strong suggestions you can give to them prior to selling the practice.
Yeah, I mean, one would be the one I just said. It's going to really hurt you if you, in fact, and I'm sure some offices do lose staff members for whatever reasons when you make the sell. And I would tell you, especially your key people. I mean, I had 20 people, not 20. I had about 12 out of the 18 sometimes we have 22, by the way, it fluctuates. But out of the core staff, I would share with them that what I'm thinking. I would give raises if you think they deserve it at that time. So I would prepare that way, because if you lose your team, it doesn't matter who buys you. It's going to be bad for you, because you're going to be obligated, whether it's 3, 4, or 5 years, and you don't want that to be uncomfortable. I would go into it. I don't know if this is true, Elijah, but I would go into it with what you're supposed to go into it with. And my company, if they were hearing this, I hope they do, would say, is that Rasner talking? Like, I would go into it with a partnership mentality and not a begrudged, they didn't make you sell to them. You shouldn't be begrudging them and fighting them. And I think that's a thing, because they look at it as Big Brother now owns you. Well, yeah, he does, because he paid you. He paid you for years and years of hard work of this thing you put together that's worthy of selling. And it can be positive and proactive. At least I'm sure DCA is not the only company like this, And so, I've heard a lot of good things about MB2 or whatever, and I did interview them, by the way. And so it's important. It is important that you have a broker with experience that you can trust. And I know that sounds self-serving, maybe. I swear to you, I mean, anybody knows me knows I tell the truth. Elijah didn't prep me on nothing. But obviously the broker is important, about do they really look after your best interests? Are they willing to say, I don't know whether you should do this at this point? Maybe that relates to that you're not ready to do the deal in your brain. And it is something you worked really hard for and held closely to your heart. I know this isn't the advice you not wanted, but this is me talking to you, Dennis, right now. But when you get to do that, because you are going to go back and forth, unless you're I'm sure the younger you are, if you're successful in your 40s or 50s, that's much harder to make that move and give up everything, which you're not really doing, unless you're in your late 60s like I was, And if you're not willing to be a partner with the group, then you're not ready yet. And, for me, it was the perfect time to sell, without a doubt. My final advice is, talk it over with your significant other. Go into it prepared, really picture that. Is this, another thing would be to have a realistic idea of your EBITDA. When I met with that guy with the Bentley, I told him my EBITDA was $2 million a year. It wasn't. Because I was naive, like I'm sure lots of you are naive. I don't know. Maybe an early call to your broker, to Elijah, whoever you're thinking of dealing with, can give you avenues to figure out what your EBITDA really is. That's really important. I mean, if your EBITDA really was $2 million, you're going to have a good payday. Mine was not that. It was fine, but it wasn't that. And so it's, what's my life going to look like on a spreadsheet financially, am I okay? That I would be ready for that. And the other changes that you would go, there are going to be negatives. You're not going to, I have no say, for example, in the software that I'm using. I hate it. I can't literally read it. It's teeny little fonts. I don't even know why they like it. I don't. So, and it sounds like I'm picking, but I'm not.
Yeah, but I think you're giving the real, actually, how it is, right? The good, bad, and the ugly. This is how it is. This is my story. This is my journey. And I think people need to hear that. And by the way, CPA is one of we have 60 plus, just over 60 buyers, and we vet all of our buyers. We take them through a tedious questionnaire and we check references, etc. And DCA is one of our buyers, and so is MB2. In fact, Dr. Glenn Bowe came on right before you on this past episode, and he told MB2. And so I think it's overall this very important, and everybody knows that there's options out there, and there's good, and there's also bad. People don't know. It's scary. I just went through a transition myself, personally, and I'll tell you, it's life changing. It's scary. It's your baby. You have a right to feel a little bit nervous about it. You made a good point about knowing your numbers and having a realistic number when you go to sell. Something that we do, and we have all of our sellers do, is a quality of earning light. Now, the buyers typically do this. The sellers do not necessarily typically do it. As a broker, we have everybody do a quality of earnings. Some people may say, well, what's the quality of earnings like? Well, first off, we have an episode just on that with Mike White, CLA. But at the end of the day, quality of earnings, it's like a forensic accountant is looking at your numbers, and they go back 3 years, and then they do the rolling 12. What is your EBITDA? What is your adjusted EBITDA? Right? What is your new patients, your active patients, and your practice? And if it's true, snapshot what the practice looks like. So when we go to sell your practice to the buyers, we didn't have some pie in the sky valuation. We're not arguing what the price is. We're doing one thing. We're bidding up the multiple of your EBITDA, right? That's it. We already know your EBITDA, your adjusted EBITDA, really. And adjusted EBITDA, for those who are listening, is simply one-time charges that happen during that year. They get added back, right, to your adjusted EBITDA. Any personal expenses. Don't feel bad. I run personal things. No problem. Add that back to your adjusted EBITDA. So we're basically talking to the buyers about what is the highest multiple or multiplier of that EBITDA. Is it 5? Is it 6? Is it 7? Is it 8? Etc. And it's not this is our valuation, and now the buyer is going to push it all the way down. We don't do that. We have actual numbers that are credible. So I think it is important what you said about the numbers. So listen, Steve, I could talk to you on here for, it's actually the longest podcast we've had, but I could talk to you for hours. And this is why people come to spend time with you in person, because you have been there. You have a history, you have an amazing track record, and you have Rasner Institute, where you're training these dentists, and I believe even potentially a business course as well that you're doing now. But if you could tell everybody kind of what you're doing now, they want to work with you, how do they personally reach out to you? And for those of you who are interested.
Well, as you said, I did create the Rasner Institute 10 years ago. I've been on this platform speaking to organizations for 26 years. 10 years ago, I went to the State Board of New Jersey. Not an easy task, by the way. And I got permission to have a course in New Jersey, in my office, where you can do live surgeries as a doctor, even if you don't have a license in Jersey, which, they're all coming from every state in America. And it's intimate. There's 12 doctor max. There's an observer spot if you're not really sure you're ready to jump in and you just want to watch. Of course, that's a lot less of an investment. But there's basically 2 courses I give. I give them multiple times a year. One is on extractions and grafting. So if you're thinking, God, I don't want to keep referring that out, but I don't know if I feel skillful enough. So there's a Thursday night pre-workshop. We vet your applications in terms of what is it you've done, what do you want to learn, right? And then we match that with patients for you, and you'll do about 6 surgeries in both courses. We work in a team of doctors. we've never had anybody say that wasn't enough work. So, everybody's sedated. We even numb the patients for you. So we don't waste 30 minutes getting them numb on bilateral blocks on a lower if you're taking out all the lowers. And there's a mentor in the room the whole time. And there's me floating from room to room to room to room. And there's a morning lecture on the most common things that I think you need to know about when you're taking out teeth. And then there's a separate course on implant dentistry where you do implants. And you do them guided, you do immediates, you do full arch, you do single sites. I mean, it's a lot. And so that's the Rasner Institute. And beyond that, I believe I have a strong sense of what works in making practice successful. I don't really do coaching and that kind of a thing, but I give courses all over the country when I'm invited to on, it's a 1-day course. I usually do pretty big events, but I would do anything if it appealed to me on what meat and potatoes, man. I don't waste your time. Like, this is what you need to do. These 5-6 things to skyrocket your practice. Maybe you're not ready to sell. Maybe your EBITDA needs to go up a couple $100,000. You would go to one of my courses.
So for anybody who's looking to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach you if they want to learn more about what you're doing in the Rasner Institute?
The easiest thing is just do my personal email. It's Dr. Dr. Rasner, Rasner, at RasnerInstitute.com.
Awesome. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. Hey, thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you as always, my friend. And I know a lot of people are going to get a lot of great lessons on the podcast. Thank you so much.
I'm glad to do it. Thanks, my man.
Absolutely. We'll see all of you on the next episode. Bye-bye.